And with me in studio is Ambassador Dr. Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the United States and former deputy minister in the Prime Minister's office, as well as i24NEWS senior diplomatic correspondent Owen Alterman. Gentlemen, a pleasure having you both with me. Owen, you mentioned in your package the implications for Israel are huge here. Yeah, I don't think the implications for Biden are likely all that huge. There are outlier scenarios where the entire election comes down to the state of Michigan and because his numbers have cratered among Arab Americans there, he barely loses it and loses the presidency and Donald Trump wins. But at the end of the day, Sarah, those are outlier scenarios. The most likely scenario is this does not matter for him come November 2024, that this is an election fought in entirely other issues, and this is not a clear and present danger for him politically. For Israel, as I said in the piece, we can exaggerate. It's easy to exaggerate the importance of this poll. A movement of 9 percentage points in Biden's approval rating on the war, in a poll, by the way, with a margin of error of plus or minus 4 percentage points, is not a huge event in itself. But we in Israel have this, I called it a healthy obsession with polling in the United States, particularly among younger generations where the numbers are so bad relative to older generations, and also, of course, a continued attention to that partisan gap of the last 20 years between Republicans and Democrats, that we look with the microscope at every poll. And I think one of the questions, as long as we have that microscope in our hand, one of the questions here is, have Democrats become more supportive of Israel over the course of the last month, and that's what's moved the numbers? Or are they more comfortable with Biden's approach? What has changed? Their opinion on Israel or their opinion on Biden? It seems more likely it's the latter, that Democrats' opinions on Israel haven't fundamentally changed, right. But the variable here is the Biden administration's policy, or as I mentioned in the piece, simply a matter of timing, that this poll was done just after the week-long pause, so it was fresh in people's minds. Of course, those incredible pictures of hostages being freed, and less so the pictures from Gaza itself. Putting the polling aside, as you mentioned, because that's just one detail here, Dr. Michael Oren, I want to get your take here on how the United States has managed this whole situation. What's your take?
It's managed it with a what you call good cop, bad cop scenario.
Right.
Okay, so you have the spokesman for the National Security Council, John Kirby, who is saying, basically Israel has the right to defend itself. We're 100% behind Israel. Israel's making major efforts to keep Palestinian civilian casualties at a minimum. You have a very similar message being given out by Matt Miller, who's a spokesman for the State Department. And then on the other side, you got the Vice President, Kamala Harris, saying that Israel is not doing enough to reduce civilian casualties. In her last speech, she didn't even mention Hamas. You have Tony Blinken coming here and saying, quote unquote, entirely too many Palestinians have been killed. So it's a double message. I think that the latter message, that Israel is not doing enough, is designed for internal political consumption within the Democratic Party, because they still have a problem with the progressives. And I think, with all due respect, they're still worried about Michigan. As a prominent journalist, and as they said to me this week, it's not about Gaza for this administration anymore. It's about Michigan, and they're still worried. So they have to appease that part of the party. On the other hand, there's all those pro-Israel demonstrations you see out there, 300,000 people in Washington. You also want to say something to them because we want them to vote Democratic as well. So a lot of internal politics here. I still, having known Joe Biden very well, I still think that this is in his gut, and it's a genuine support for Israel that he feels. And yeah, he wants to get reelected, but when I used to sit with him, he used to always say that he used to begin every sentence with, "My father used to say to me," and one of his famous lines was, "My father used to say to me, never crucify yourself on a small cross." All right, try saying that in Hebrew. Right. Never say on a small cross. This is a very big cross. We're the cross.
The Jerusalem cross.
No, it's the State of Israel cross.
Right.
And he is so far willing to, crucify himself on that cross.
Until now we're seeing this change of tone, as we mentioned, expressing concerns about civilian casualties, of course, pushing for the need of a future independent Palestinian state. Is this change of tone, though, still leading up to the elections and him wanting to wrap up this whole Middle Eastern conflict in order to be able to focus on the campaign?
But of course he does, and that's why you have Tony Blinken coming here and saying, listen, guys, you're running out of time. This can't go on indefinitely. And think about, give me a date. Going back a couple of years, back in 2021, when we had another little war with Hamas, and I was at that time very much involved in the diplomacy. The war had gone on for 8 days, and every night Joe Biden came out and said Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel has a right to defend itself. On the 9th day, Biden called our government and said, "Okay, tonight it stops." and nobody wanted to stop. The polls were saying 80% of Israelis didn't want to stop, and was involved in an effort to get 3 more days. Give us till Sunday. This was on a Thursday, and the White House said, no, it's got to stop tonight, and it stopped.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think we'll see the same level of U.S. support we've seen until now?
Yes, if we continue the pace, I think the pace is the sense again, and I'm not in Gaza. The sense is that we've picked up the pace militarily, and that Hamas its control over the Gaza Strip is wavering and may break, and I wouldn't be surprised. I want to be interested to hear what you think about this as we get closer to the leadership surrounding them, that you're going to have another Hamas offer to negotiate for hostages. And you'll have another series of pauses, and they'll try to play for time.
And Owen, to that point, I wanted to get an update from you in terms of the ongoing negotiations for a possible second truce in order to bring more hostages. Where do things stand right now?
Look, it seems like it's on the back burner, right? Israel has made a decision that at this moment in time, at least at this moment in time, the 2 goals of winning the war proper and bringing the hostages home are not running in parallel, are not mutually reinforcing. They're at odds with each other, and Israel, for the time being, has prioritized winning the war, a goal in itself, and also potentially over time leverage to bring the hostages back. I have to say, I have a hard time getting inside Hamas's head. If they already expect reasonably that they are going to lose ground militarily in the Gaza Strip, and rationally that's what they should expect given all of the evidence up until now,
right?
Why wait until that happens to make the hostage deal? Ooh. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me unless that is not their expectation. They actually expect that somehow they're going to turn the tide militarily. Maybe they're gambling and rolling the dice that Israel will make some big mistake and will kill a lot of civilians, God forbid, or there'll be some huge humanitarian collapse beyond the very difficult situation there already is. And in that scenario, they'll have more leverage. That's the only thing I can understand. But other than that, if that's already their expectations.
It's all about the ceasefire. It's all about the ceasefire. And what Hamas is banking on is the media focus on Palestinian suffering, the protests in the street, all of which put pressure on governments, maybe less on the American government now, but other governments, to support the imposition of a ceasefire, maybe through the UN. That's what they're banking on. They can't defeat us, militarily, but they can deny us the right to the ability to win. And a ceasefire means Hamas gets away with mass murder. They win, we lose. It's that easy. So that, for Hamas's perspective, that might be perceived as low-hanging fruit.
Well, there's also reports, though, that Hamas is holding that last card back because they know that these last hostages are the ones that are in the worst conditions, some of whom are women who've experienced rape, sexual violence, and that that will change the optics, because up until now they've released hostages who now we understand are reportedly had been under the influence of drugs to appear more happy looking and more waving goodbye to their captors. But these women, these men who are going to be coming back are going to change those optics. And my question is how is the U.S. also going to deal with that and help in bringing those hostages back home?
I think, well, that's going to be difficult. Again, I want to say, as the noose tightens around Hamas's neck, I wouldn't be surprised if Hamas comes up and says, okay, we're willing to negotiate for several more hostages, give us another 2-3 days of ceasefire. And what happens is that the ceasefire then becomes sort of the new normal. And so people in the world will say, well, listen, if you agree to a 3-4 day ceasefire, why can't you have a 3-4 week ceasefire? Why not? And ceasefire, it sounds good. It sounds who opposes a ceasefire where people stop shooting one another, and they'll pay for time. Their big problem is they're going to run out, and I think you're absolutely right. They're going to run out the bank of hostages that won't come out and make them look horrible. And it says, I think they probably have a quote unquote, and I say this in italics, a strategic reserve of hostages who they can release and will cause them less harm.
Oh, and I want to discuss with you a little bit about the aftermath of Gaza. Once this war wraps up, but however which way it does wrap up, there will be Gaza, and there will still be Gazans who need to be ruled on, who will need to be some sort of governing body there. What are the different plans on the table right now, different negotiations that we're hearing? We're hearing different reports.
Yeah, I don't know how much credence to put into the reports. The situation, again, there are three baskets of solutions, right? An Israeli reoccupation, some kind of Palestinian governance structure, and some kind of international structure. And there are varieties in each category. They can also, in a sense, be mixed and matched. But I'm interested in Ambassador Oren's opinion. Look, the reality is, once Israel defeats Hamas, assuming that the objective is met and that the war's won in the way that the Israeli public understands and expect, the IDF will be in control of Gaza, and the default is that Israel will be occupying it. And if that's the case, it seems to me, I'm just in your opinion, we all have to be cognizant of the risk that Israel will be stuck with Gaza, and that in a sense, the leverage may actually be on the other side, to the extent that Israel does not want to govern the Strip, okay? To the extent that we want out, by definition, other players will have leverage over us. And I think it's a risk that's important for us to consider in understanding how much we may have in the medium term, not just in the short term, but in the medium term, to actually shape the situation on the day after the way we would want to.
Michael Oren, I see you
right.
nodding.
The leverage will be on the Palestinian issue in general, okay? But there's going to be a price to be paid. Those are things as a free lunch for American support during this whole thing, and the currency will be Palestinian. They'll say the United States and maybe some of even our Arab friends in the Middle East will come to us and say, okay, you want an international force, you want to internationalize Gaza, you're going to have to do something about the Palestinian issue. And that's where the leverage comes into play. And that, given Israel's current government, that'll be a very hard lift.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for joining me here in studio.
Thank you.